Right, so welcome to Collab Writers, and tonight our special guest is Barbara Gorna, who is many things, but just to highlight, Barbara is a producer, a filmmaker, a writer, an activist, and many other things which we will discover this evening. Barbara, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time tonight to join us.
Thank you.
Just before we kick off, Barbara, can you just talk to us about when you first realized that you were a creative and how that kind of manifested into your life?
Well, it was an interesting question you sent me, so I had to think about it. And I have to tell you a story from when I was probably about 3.5, 4 years old. And I actually come from a tiny little market town. Well, actually, I come from a village near a market town called Clitheroe. And on Saturdays, they used to have a market, not just with fruit and veg, but also selling clothes. And I must have been knee-high to a goose. And I remember seeing this wonderful little purple coat with a velvet collar. So I really wanted this coat, and blah, blah, blah. Grandparents obviously said no, etc. I went home and I spun the most amazing story about this purple coat to my mother. And I said, this coat was fabulous. I tried it on, it fitted really well. I told her how much it cost. And the grandparents said I could ask and then they'd buy it for me. It was all complete rubbish, to be honest. So how did I start writing? By telling giant fibs about something I actually wanted. Which is where it all started. And then I realized I actually liked the look on my mother's face as I was telling her the story.
Oh.
So I'm not sure whether she believed me or not, but she liked the telling of the story.
Did you get the coat? No,
that's really bad, but I do remember the purple coat. I'll never, ever forget it. And even when I was about 5 or 6, you know, when you won't remember, but in the old days, teachers used to be able to just leave the room and what have you. They used to sit me on the table when I was about 6. And because I was always a small child, I'm not much bigger now, about 5'1". Sit me on the desk and say, okay, Barbara, tell us the story and I'll be back in 10 minutes.
Very good.
And that's what I used to do. So that's how I got started, but that's way before doing anything professional.
Oh, that's a lovely story, Barbara. And there's so much to cover in your career, but one of the first creative things I understand that you did was you co-founded a literary agency, Red Hammer. Can you tell us about how that came about?
Well, I was working in politics at the time. I'd been a director of Fawcett and a trustee for about 4 years. I was involved with Fawcett for about 7, 8 years. And I'd got to meet quite a lot of interesting people in politics. And you know how it is, if any of you have ever been involved, people always, yep. So I started saying to people, well, why don't you write it down? Write down your story. Mm. And then I met a guy called Peter Cox, who had a small literary agency. And I said, look, I know all these people. Mm-hmm. I can bring them in. Let's do something together. And in a way, I was writing, but I wasn't confident enough at that time. This would be about 2004.
Yeah.
To actually, I was starting to produce something. I did actually do something in 2003, but I wasn't, if you like, confident enough as a writer to push myself. And it was a good way to learn. I mean, one of the books I actually commissioned was a book called Perfect Hostage, which is now a movie about Aung San Suu Kyi. Because I knew the journalist to sort of vaguely socially, because I'm a member of Chelsea Arts, and he was slightly, he'd lost his way a bit, let's put it that way. I was going to say washed up, but he might kill me. So I won't say that. And he was writing books on tourism and Vietnam and all that sort of region. And I said, look, you know the region, why don't you write something serious and sensible and write about Aung San Suu Kyi? Yeah. And so he did, and it became a #1 bestseller in the Far East and became a movie.
Wow.
And that's how I did it. I did it because I just did it. So I think anything you want to do, just be bold, because people can only say no. You've nothing to lose except your self-respect and, all the rest of it. But hey, give yourself a talking to and do it anyway.
That's what I love about you and the things that you've done, Barbara. You've done so many things that it's quite difficult to sort of highlight them. So if you were to give advice to writers or people who can't get things published, would you have any words of wisdom for them?
Probably it's easier now because you've got Instagram. You can have your own blog.
Yeah.
Way back then, which is of course nearly 20 years ago, then you couldn't. There was no medium to get your message across. And publishing houses then used to be staffed with people who knew each other. And then if you're an unknown writer, your work would go on the slush pile and get read at some point, because certainly at Redhammer, we were actually commissioning people who were already in the public eye. We did a second version of the F1 diet, so we did F2.
Yeah.
And we did a tell-all about Prince Charles from one of his he's called them female clerks rather than secretaries. I did another book called Unzipped. But these were kind of people I had already met, and I felt that they had a bigger story to tell than was already out there. So, but it's easier now. Just do it yourself. Publish.
Yeah.
Publish and be damned. Do it.
I think that's really good advice. And also, as Izzy was telling us earlier, Izzy's managed to get her work published, and I know Izzy's active on social media as well. And it's definitely, there are so many ways to get out there now, not just who you know. So that's really helpful. And to sort of trip away from that, I know that you've also had a career in theatre as well. You've written and you've also acted on the stage as well, Barbara. Can you tell us about that sort of period of things and how that came about?
Well, most people I think who go into writing are already doing something else because they've got to earn a living, and it's quite hard to earn a living as a writer.
That's true.
So I was sort of edging into it, and I was asked to do the Vagina Monologues in the West End for a charity performance at the Criterion, and that was quite scary, actually. But it was fun, with a lot of people that you will have heard of or are currently in showbiz. That was tough because because it was a charity event, you don't get that much rehearsal time. So you have to learn it and just stand there and hope you get the laughs in the right places. So I did that. It was directed by Irina Brown. But the first piece I wrote was actually firstly performed at Demos, which is a think tank that was about domestic violence. Then I was sponsored, I think it was 2003, by Good Housekeeping. I actually got £30,000, which was an enormous amount of money then for a play. Yes, so that was my first theatre piece, but I thought I'd actually rather do film because I was still working in politics then. So in a strange way, it was easier because you have a bigger crew.
Right.
Because with theatre, a lot of it is on the writer, and it seems to me, at least then, so I can't speak for now, but at least then, there were more people to collaborate, literally. So I made a short film because I was trying to get a message across about domestic violence.
Yes.
And I was on the Domestic Violence Committee in Westminster. And it's all very dry when it's written down. But if you get someone speaking words, particular words that are true, then it's much more emotional. And that was my first piece, which was a 10-minute piece. And I wrote that for Westminster and managed the campaign, Not Another Boxing Day, about violence at Christmas. And that's how I shifted. I have actually, which is a terrible thing to say, been asked to write a play during lockdown, and I haven't done it. I have actually been commissioned to do a play for theatre, but I find it quite difficult. I don't know about anybody else, moving between film and theatre, because it's very different style.
Very different, isn't it? Yeah.
Really different. And I think I've got so used to film now, I'm not sure I can do it, is the honest answer.
Yeah, I wrote, one of the first things I wrote was a one-act play, which is buried somewhere in my apartment and hasn't really seen the light of day, but it's something that, maybe it's something I'll share with you, Barbara, because you might be able to sprinkle some magic dust on it. But it's also sort of focused around women, so it might be something that we can talk about offline. But you mentioned politics, Barbara, and obviously that has been quite a significant part of your career and has also influenced what you have done as well. Did that sort of, I suppose I'm quite intrigued to know how your political career has merged and infused what you create.
I think you write about what you know.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes more honest, and you get a real inner voice in there, and you just reach down, pull it out, and make it stronger.
Yeah.
And I had, as Jenny knows, been in a horrible relationship I won't go into the details here, but for 4 years, which was a complete nightmare. So I had, if you like, all that emotional know-how that I could reach down and pull and use. And that partly got me into politics, because I realized that if I, as a middle-class woman, had nowhere to go in a domestic violence situation, God help anybody else. And that's why I got involved. And I started to write about it. And people seemed to like what I'd written. And that's how I shifted, by using my own experience. First of all, trying to change things in politics, which I was able to do. I actually put forward the initial proposal for the domestic violence register. Brilliant. Because I worked on that bill in the House of Lords. And they didn't want it, because the problem with politics is that often property rights, well, you know, as a lawyer, supersede women's rights. In fact, mostly they do. That's a real passion of mine, that I don't think, in domestic violence cases, I don't see why the woman should leave the house. That's like being burgled and then handing in the keys.
That's very true. Yes.
So that's one of my passions, to try and, or then it was to try and change thinking on that. Why should the woman move and the children when they're not the perpetrator of the crime? I think we look at it all.
It's skewed, isn't it? Yeah.
Completely back to front.
Yeah.
But the thinking, the mindset is very fixed in that, get the woman to a place of safety, etc. Much easier and cheaper to actually jail the bloke, and it usually is a bloke. But that's quite a big ship to turn around.
Yes.
But that's why I started doing it.
Yeah. You've done so many things, Barbara. You know, I want to say thank you, because there's so many things like the domestic violence register, which has, you know, changed so many women's lives and will continue to in the future. And I know that you've also, you know, you've shifted from theatre as well into, I guess, what you'd call docudramas. Would you call them docudramas and documentaries?
Yeah, I wrote, I was working on a movie. Well, I wrote Silent Voices, which is a series of monologues that was broadcast on Sky. That's an hour-long docudrama. And then, because of that writing, I was lucky enough to be picked up to do a rewrite on Carmen's Kiss, which is about a sex trafficked, it's a feature film, sex trafficked girl who sought revenge. So that was really lucky.
And how did that come about? Had somebody seen your other work and then contacted you as a result of that? Yeah.
Basically, I used to go to, I don't know if it's still on, COVID, etc., Directors Guild meetings. They used to have a meeting every month at the Curzon Cinema.
Right. Okay.
And so basically, it's networking events like this, and then collaboration, and then saying, you know, and also being forthright and saying, if you're stuck with it, let me have a look at it. Because I think from Redhammer, looking at other people's work, it teaches you where something might be going wrong. So working on other people's work is quite useful, and say, look, this isn't working, I think, because of X, Y, Z. Yeah. And so I was lucky enough that the director and producers like my work. So I was just, you know, it was a lot of networking. I say lucky, it actually was a lot of hard work, going to classes and then elbowing my way in. I might add, you know, in your late, you know, I don't know how old everybody is listening, but if you're in your late 40s, to elbow your way into another career is, you've got to have fairly sharp elbows. But I was just everywhere I could be, networking, basically. Saying, you know, I can do this. That's the only way to do it. Just be everywhere.
You're remarkable, Barbara, you really are. But on that note, you know, given that you've done so much and, you know, you're constantly moving into different things and finding opportunities, how on earth, and you have a family as well, how on earth have you managed to balance things and make things work? Because I think, you know, you could probably, I'm sure you could give some wise words to those who are finding it difficult to balance things right now.
Oh no, I'm hopeless at that.
You can't possibly be.
I'm hopeless at that. Find a supportive husband. I don't necessarily mean financially, but I mean partner.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, but I've only known Simon, my current husband, for 10 years. So he wasn't around when I was doing all this, you know, earlier stuff at all. And I've actually chucked him out the house, so he's not here. So, get a cleaner. And I know this is all very middle class and all that, but no, I was never very good at work-life balance. If I'm focused on doing something, I'll do it. I have a confession to make as an aside. My daughter, when she was about 7, was asked to do a diagram and draw a circle of how much time, God knows why they were doing this in school, but hey, does your mummy do this? Does, you know, it's like cooking this and this. And then there was another circle, you know, part of the slide, the pie slice, shall we say, was working. And mine was like sort of 48% mummy working, which is a bit, that's guilty, but she's okay. She's not, you know, she's 30, so she's still alive. We're still speaking. So yeah, no, I was hopeless at work. Don't do the work-life balance. I never did it. Never did it. I was so bad.
I suppose it's something that we just have to continue to juggle, and we learn as we grow, I guess, don't we?
Yeah, but I've kind of given up now. I don't have small children, so you know, it's different. It's different. I'm just, you know, I was lucky at the right time to be able to be focused.
Yeah.
If you like, because I had my children much earlier. So I think it must be a nightmare having, you know, children in your 30s in a serious job. And you're coming up to menopause and they're teenagers. Welcome to that. So I was kind of lucky. So, you know, start early.
That's good advice.
Or late, one way or the other, but don't clash as a teenager with a menopausal woman. Would be bad, I imagine, and probably bad for anybody listening.
So another thing I really wanted to talk about with you tonight, Barbara, is obviously, I mean, I was thinking of you today when I voted, actually, just as I looked at the sign of the polling station, and I just thought, gosh, you know, so many women have done so much for other women, and it always makes me very proud and grateful when I go and vote, and I say thank you to all of those women who fought for the vote that we now have today. I know that this has also been one of your passions, and you have fought tooth and nail to clear the name of Emily Wilding Davidson. And that has involved you making documentaries, and lots of work has been involved in that and the cause. Can you tell us about how this sort of, how you first got the bee in your bonnet and where you took it?
Oh, well, there are two things, again, overlapping, if you like, writing and what was going on in my political life, because I fought a seat in 97, and a long time ago up in Manchester. It wasn't a winnable seat, it was my first seat at a general election, and I actually was going into a golf club to give a speech in an evening. It's a big sign in a particular area that actually said men's bar. Actually, the sign said men only, men's bar. And I just sort of was marching through, because I realized the conference room or the dining room they'd set up was beyond. I started walking through, and this guy, this barman, actually spotted my way, literally folded his arms and said, "No, it's women and tradesmen round the back." And I just laughed, and I thought, whoa, you are kidding me. And I said, no, I'm going through. And eventually I talked my way through, carried on, didn't think about it. After that election, I was then asked to be on, there was a sort of think tank listening to Britain afterwards, and I was asked to be on that national committee.
Yeah. Went
into the Carlton Club to get a glass of water, and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is the men's bar." And I thought, you are having a laugh here, surely. So I went in the meeting, and I thought, this is wrong. And I had a look at the law, and private clubs have become an exemption from the Act, from the original Sex Discrimination Act, which meant the men's clubs could do as they liked and bar women, or only offer them second-tier membership. So I was working on that to try and change, it was a Sex Discrimination number 2 bill, which is now part of the Equality Act.
Mm-hmm.
But I started doing that, and that was my name changed in between. For writing, I went back to my maiden name, which is Gorna, but my name then was Barbara Nutt. If you ever look it up, you think, who is this one? A bit schizophrenic, but people did change that. Women changed their names then. Yeah. Anyhow, then this is a bit of a long-winded answer, sorry about this, but there was a picture in the Daily Mail of Emily Wilding Davidson. Mm. And if you remember the iconic picture, she's got her arms up like that, and people think she's cowering away from a horse. And I looked at that picture, and I thought, that's a throwing position. That's a cowering position. Yeah. Horse is coming at you. You don't say, "Oh, come and get me." You do this. It's human instinct. Mm. And there was this, typical article that was a bit, certainly in those days, sort of anti-women type thing. And I thought, I must have a look at this. And then Emily Wilding Davidson's sash came up at auction, and my late husband bought it for me. Mm-hmm. So basically, she's been a bloody nuisance for the last 20 years, is all I can say. The sash is now on the wall in the Palace of Westminster. Mm-hmm. But it took quite a while to get it in there, simply because people were insistent that she was a suicide, simply because that had been written in the history books. But I went to the archives at Kew, and if you look at the original newspaper reports, they say that she had grabbed the king's horse's bridle. She was definitely reaching to throw something. Right. But it took me a long time. It took about 10 years for the mood to shift on that. And then in 2013, the Channel 4 made Secrets of a Suffragette, and they were able to slice down the footage to show that Tattenham Corner had, in fact, where she stepped out, had changed over the years from 1913 until today, So she could see the king's horse. And my theory, they believe, was correct because they'd sliced all the original black and white footage down. And so she's been a pain ever since, because she took a long time to, get people to change their minds. I'm haunted by this woman. I'm going to have words when I get to the other side. She keeps turning up.
Well, you've done and are doing a wonderful job of representing her rights from the other side. So well done you, Barbara. And can you tell us a bit about Rebel? So what was Rebel about?
Well, I just made a short documentary for the House of Commons when the Suffrage went in. But yeah, Rebel is a movie I developed with Joan Lane, who was the original, the King's Speech, which everybody's heard of, was actually first developed as a theatre piece. And Joan she's a big theatrical family, and she has a small theatre in her house in North London. It was first performed there. So she'd seen my work on silent voices and was interested in helping me out, is all I can say, because she's an elder stateswoman and wanted to do some work with me and wanted to have a look at what I was doing. So I was privileged enough to go to her house. And it was quite tough because I came from politics. Remember, not used to working on feature films.
Yes.
Never gone to, and studied at drama school or scripts or, National Film School, anything like that. Obviously, I went to rain dance, the courses. Thank you, Elliot. But otherwise, I wasn't professional. And I didn't know the left-hand side of the page was, for notes, script notes and things like that. And the first time I went to see her, she sent me notes about 1 a.m. And she's obviously very experienced, mostly theatre producer. Yeah. And I sort of looked at them and thought, I can kind of remember this. But when we sat down in her enormous North London kitchen, she said, "Oh, you haven't noted up the script." And I'm thinking, you what? No idea what noting up the script was. I said, yeah, okay. Because obviously you only get a short time with someone like that, like an hour and a half, 2 hours. Yeah. And I thought, right, okay, I'll see if I can remember most of it. But she was going, 17 doesn't work because on 72, page 72, this, and this, and this. And if, really detailed, and after about, 45 minutes to an hour, it was a sunny June day. And I started staring out of the window like a badly behaved pupil. And I was watching this blue bottle, I'll never forget this, and crawling down the window pane in the heat, because the words that were just coming at me, blah, 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 character development, blah, blah, blah. And she went, right, getting up, I can tell you're not taking any notes of me. She went to her fridge, opened the door, and she had a maid, somebody to help in the house, housekeeper. Yeah. Threw 2 packets of M&S sandwiches at me and a bottle of water and said, "I'm going upstairs to do some work. When you're ready, let me know and we'll come back and start again." But I thought, right, okay. So that was a good lesson. So I was, so that script is still around. And in fact, she's back in touch with me and we are talking about moving it forward. It's a completed script. Fantastic. So that's where we are with that one. Oh, lovely story. And I think that's probably the best way to learn, isn't it, from somebody like that, actually, on the job. And probably makes being a lawyer and a politician quite easy compared to that, I would imagine. I tell you, the first time I truly understood what losing the plot was when she was talking at me for 45 minutes and I had no notes. I thought, right. Now I really understand the meaning of that phrase. Never forgotten it. Always take notes. Always. Always. Very good advice. Oh dear. And Barbara, you've also set up Blackberry Films. Is that a production company that is still running? Are you still looking for scripts? How does that work? It's really just a vehicle to to own scripts. It's not really a trading company, because everything I've done has been in collaboration.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would never not do something in collaboration. So it's just the name, if you like. And for the last 7 years, apart from Secrets of a Suffragette, and of course working with Nina and yourself and Swati recently.
Yes, and Paul as well. Actually, I was just going to come to that, because that is a collaboration that's happened through Nina, and I know, and a lot of the Collab writers who are on here tonight. Can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, how that all kicked off? Because it was basically what interested you during lockdown, wasn't it? You came across Dorset Hall. Can you talk us through that?
How we got together, or Dorset Hall?
Well, Dorset Hall, how it kind of came upon your radar, and why you became interested in it, because it is a fascinating story.
I know, it was that dreadful woman again, Emily Wilding Davidson. In lockdown, we'd moved to Wimbledon at the beginning of lockdown and really couldn't go anywhere apart from the shops. So I kept driving past this semi-derelict building called Dorset Hall, and for some reason it rang a bell, because I'd done a lot of research on the suffragettes, around the turn of the century and women's lives, etc., etc. And I thought, well, there must be a reason for this. So I looked it up, and it was the married home of Rose Lamartine Yates, who was a suffragette, one of the less well-known suffragettes. But what was a weird thing is that she was a good friend of Emily Wilding Davidson. And this woman, I went in and I took lots of photographs, because the building was derelict and owned by a housing association who Jennifer tells me I'm not allowed to name for fear of death. And they had just let it fall. It was just like a large rectory. It's not anything super fancy, but it'd been quite a nice house. Anyway, the history behind it was Rose was a good friend of Emily Wilding Davidson's, and in fact, basically was at university with her and organized her funeral, the huge funeral, about 100,000 people in the streets of London. And Emily's half-brother and her mother stayed there after Emily's death at the Derby. So something was pulling me towards that house. It was really bizarre. And the upshot is, during lockdown, I hired a drone, because I could see it was raining in through French doors. So I hired a drone and we took pictures of the roof, and annoyed the housing association and the council so much that eventually they did something about it, and Historic England. So it was a kind of lockdown project, and now the National Trust are involved. And next week we have a meeting with the All England Club, the tennis club. And I want them to put some money in to save this house. It's not a very big house, but for sure it would have fallen down. I set up a group. It's not like, me just waving a flag. I have got a team of 5 people, but it was an interesting lockdown project. So, and it's still ongoing, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. And what do you hope? What do you hope sort of comes out of the? I guess it's a mini short documentary. What are your hopes for what that might achieve?
What I hope is that it will remind people that buildings are important, and I think that buildings associated with women are really important because there are so few of them. So it's important that we don't let them fall down. And I think this is important, not just nationally, but internationally, that we need to raise awareness of this all over the world and say, look, if a woman has lived here and changed something, then we really need to recognize it and preserve the building. Because I've been at war with Historic England, and they do what we have in the UK called a blue plaque project. And they said she wasn't important enough to have a blue plaque on her house. And she was actually the first woman member of the Cyclists Association It does have a proper name, but I'll call it the Cycling Association
Mm-hmm.
now. She was first woman on the council or board of that, and she was one of the first women members of the London Assembly in 1918, as well as setting up soup kitchens, etc., etc., and writing and making speeches on Wimbledon Common and other places. And they turned her down. As I'm having a current battle with Historic England, if anybody's got any contacts. But what we've decided to do is do our own plaques with an organisation called Mapping Women's Suffrage.
Brilliant.
And that's where we are at the moment. So we're taking it forward politically, so that if the blue plaques don't want us, we'll start our own.
Oh, you're amazing. There's no stopping you.
Oh, there is.
What I really do admire, Barbara, is, you know, we hear about influencers on Instagram and other social medias, and you're what I would call a real influencer. So you use your background, your skills, your resources, everything, just to make a difference and, you know, change the world for people today and for future generations. Have you got any advice for people who also want to make a difference in the world and are thinking about doing that through creative projects? What would your words of wisdom be to them?
Work with other people and don't give up.
Great.
And also don't be afraid, if I can add this, don't be afraid of being disliked.
That's a good one.
I think as women, we're brought up and conditioned to be, you know, we want the job, but we also don't want to be disliked. It's much harder for women, professional women, to, if you like, just go for it. And I think one of the advantage of being older, certainly my age, is I don't give two hoots if you like me or not. Just effing do it. You can cut that bit. No, I'm not interested in being liked. I'm just interested in getting things done.
Yeah.
And I think you can step that need, or if you like, push that need aside. It helps a lot. You're thinking, do I really need Joe Bloggs to like me? Or do I want to persuade him to do what needs to be done? And I think if you take that need, we all need to be liked to a certain extent, but if you take that need to be liked out of it, it's easier.
I love the way you've put that, because I think it's something that we don't necessarily think about ourselves, and, you know, arguably it would be the ego or, you know, the self being too persuasive if it's overshadowing what you actually want to do. So I think that's really, really good advice. Thank you. So what lies ahead for you, Barbara? What are your sort of pursuits for the future? Because I know I'm sure you have a lot of things ticking away in that head of yours.
Well, hopefully I will be collaborating on some documentaries. I'm particularly keen on making documentaries, if you like, that are on women's issues. I'm not just talking about violence against women and so on, but a lot of documentaries are, you know, there's like 300 documentaries on Hitler and that type of thing. There are less documentaries on important women or issues that are important to women. So I'm very keen on that. Also, I will obviously be continuing with Dorset Hall, even if we don't manage to turn it. I would like to turn it into a women's wellbeing centre. If we don't manage to achieve that, at least nobody will knock it down now, because there's been too much in the press, which is quite useful. And especially when your documentary's out or wherever it's going, I don't know. What do I want to do in the future? I need to set up a charity for the sash that's on the wall in Westminster, because I think that it would be useful if a museum bought it rather than me owning it personally. And then what I want to do with the money is actually do women-centric projects So I want to say, if you like, sell the sash, monetize it, and then work on women-centered film projects.
That's fantastic.
That's what I want to do.
Yeah. And I mean, they're such good causes. Do you think that you would, take these things internationally as well, rather than, because obviously a lot of your focus has been on the ground, through politics and through this work. Would you like to sort of increase your sphere of influence and take these things internationally?
Well, we've just done something for Japanese TV on the sash, and I think it's I'd love to do a project called Women Talking.
Okay.
And because you were talking earlier about a podcast, and just have a sort of international women talking podcast on a weekly basis to pick up international issues. I was away for about 10 days and I picked up a movie called Women. I don't know if you've seen it.
Is that the one from a while back?
Not that back, no, recently, about 3 or 4 years, I think. And it's just international women speaking about their lives. They're small clips.
Oh wow!
So they're real women, but it just, because I think internationally, one of the problems we have here, we're very European centric, and
yes.
we're very privileged, and we don't realize that in most of the world, women don't have any rights.
Yeah.
Or they have far fewer rights
and
have extremely difficult lives. And it's very easy to stay, shall we say, Europe or even English speaking focused on that. I do think it's important to broaden things out. And I think women as filmmakers are in the best place to do it.
Absolutely. That sounds like an amazing project, Barbara. I've just seen from the chat as well that Elliot has said that the SASH project could be a brilliant crowdfunding campaign, which I'm sure he's right.
If someone wants to run it, Phil. I don't know if I've got the time. No, I need to do something with it, or, it's just sitting there at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
The problem is it's very fragile. Its last outing was to the Olympics for Danny Boyle in 2012 as part of the Suffragette thing. And I had to lug it with Simon, my husband, in the back of a Volkswagen Golf because it's in a 6-foot oak museum case. And it's on a wall, but we had to shove it in the back of the car and take it to Stratford. I tell you, to be a writer, never have a dull life. That's the thing. Things happen to you and then you just write them down. That's the best way to be a writer. Let things happen.
Oh, Barbara, you're wonderful. It's been an absolute delight asking you all of these questions. I'm going to open up the floor to anybody else who wants to ask you a question, to give them an opportunity. Do please either put your hand up or unmute yourself if you want to ask Barbara anything, or put something in the chat.
I was going to ask, so I've done a lot of projects around sort of women in history who should be celebrated. And I've always found that the research process is so much harder because either a lot of it's been covered up or people haven't deemed it important enough to take a record in the first place, or it's been silenced in some way. And so I just wondered, how have you found researching your projects and how have you gotten around those issues?
Well, I think it's easier now because there's a lot of information on the internet. But one of the best ways is to go to the archive library. If you've tried it, Q, which is really, because one of the things I picked up from Q is that Britain actually used to export women for sex trafficking rather than bring them in. And women actually used to get chloroformed on the streets. This is about, 1890s to say pre-war. So they'd put chloroform, take them down to Dover, and they were particularly liked by the Germans, apparently, because English women used to like to fight back, and they liked feisty women. And this information all came from the archives in Kew. So if you go to the archives and actually look at original documents, that's the best way. And the Women's Library has tons of stuff as well, and Museum of London and so on. But I agree with you, women's lives have not been documented, hence my passion for saving the buildings that are still there and finding some more.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Izzy. Any other questions or reflections, even if you don't have a question?
I do. Barbara, as a woman and as an activist, how would you, if you were in America, deal with the current Supreme Court view on abortion?
Well, I think it's appalling, actually, that they want to. I believe in women's right to choose, but I don't know how I deal with it from an American point of view, because I've never been involved in American politics, so I wouldn't know the steps on the ladder to fix it.
It was legal in America to have abortions until the 1920s, when even the 1950s, the far right evangelists like Billy Graham were very pro-choice. But suddenly this became viewed as a fundraising opportunity, and that's why the far right, really the basic is they get lots and lots of money to fund the anti-abortion movement. That's shocking, but anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Because I think America is much more religious. It's quite polarized, only from what I've seen. I'm obviously not American, but a lot more people go there to church and believe in God and say they believe in God than we do here. And I think it's probably connected with that. But how I'd fix it, I don't know, because I've never been involved in American politics, so I wouldn't know where to start.
Thank you, Elliot. Emma?
I have a question, but one thing I would just say on the topic that you were talking about, I saw that some major companies are allowing their staff to have time off work paid while they can travel to a different state to have termination. So that's how they're sort of supporting the cause for women. That's what I heard. Anyway, my question to you, Barbara, would be, just because I'm a bit of a film nut, as people know, what would be a film that you love or that you think is important with a female lead who is an activist of some kind? Do you have a favorite film like that?
Well, it's a very old film, but one of my favorite films growing up was Gone with the Wind. But especially the scene when she's in the turnip field or the carrot field and vows to fight and never go hungry again. I think that's a really memorable scene. And I love that movie. And I like the way she's had 4 husbands too, quite blithely. I think she had 4 husbands, didn't she? Scarlett O'Hara.
Can't remember how many. I remember having quite a few, but I also love that film.
Love it. It used to be on every Christmas.
I know.
But no, I also liked Promising Young Woman. That was great. The way Emerald spun that around. And you know the movie.
Yeah, yeah, Promising Young Woman is very cool.
I love that.
She won the Oscar for the screenplay, didn't she?
Yeah. So that's great. So yeah, both of those. Strong women, yeah.
Thank you, Emma. Anybody else?
Barbara, do you see yourself as a creative, as a writer or a producer, filmmaker first, or are you a political activist who uses the medium of film to move things along?
I think that's a really interesting question. I would say 15 years ago, I used the medium of film to get the message across in a more efficient and moving way so that people would be forced to act. That's what I certainly did, because I thought it was an easier way to move people than things just being written down. Now I would say I'm doing both hand in hand. The Dorset Hall project found me. I didn't find Dorset Hall. I wasn't looking, to rescue a building. It just happened that I fell across it, and something needed to be done about it. But no, I think now I'm definitely going back to filmmaking. You asked what am I working on? I'm very interested in a project that I sent to Jennie called, which is basically a documentary called Grand Theft Britain, which is how Britain looted the world. And most of the treasure is in museums and not seen and so on. So I'm very interested. So if you like, again, that's political. It's a political statement, but it's also a way of getting a message across.
How difficult or otherwise do you find it to find an audience for these types of projects?
I think Grand Theft Britain is probably quite topical at the moment because of, I think America started returning items to Nigeria. And obviously the Elgin marbles are usually in the papers one way or another every month. So there is a lot of agitation to return items from the countries of origin. So I think it's becoming easier, definitely. Also, it's becoming cheaper because you can pretty much shoot anything now almost on an iPhone because technology's moved on, so things aren't so expensive to make, as you will know. It's much cheaper.
That's true.
Yeah. So pretty much, with a skilled crew, you can make anything you like, and it doesn't have to cost the earth. Obviously, a big feature film, period costume is a different story, but generally, short documentaries don't need to have to cost the earth. One of the most important things, I think, is contact building. So if you want to make a film about oranges and lemons, find somebody who works in that industry and follow through. That I think has been the most useful thing that I've been able to do. Certainly.
Thank you.
Can I speak?
Of course, Julie, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. I thought this was a webinar, so I'm sort of not dressed for the occasion. But anyway, thank you for, it's interesting what's going on. You talk about networking, right? Now, I was lucky enough through a networking situation with Rain Dance to make 2 short films out of the blue because someone asked to see my scripts. So do you mentioned the Directors Guild. Are there any other network situations you could recommend?
I think Elliot would know better than I, because I have been working in a different industry through happenstance, for want of a better word. For 7 years, I had to take over a family business and farm. This is true, as Jennifer knows, when a family member died, and turn it around. So I haven't, and obviously then it's been COVID. So I haven't done any recent networking apart from very recently with the Collab team. So I'm not the right person to ask, but I'm sure Rain Dance are.
Anyone else got any ideas?
What?
Has anyone else got any networking they found useful? No, all right.
So I think, I mean, obviously this organisation is helpful, and obviously Elliot also has quite a lot of networking stuff with Rain Dance. Boozing and Schmoozing is one of the main ones I can think
that's
of.
where I actually met someone, and they said, "Oh, what are you doing at the moment?" I said, "I've just written these two," and they asked to see the scripts, and they really liked them, and I've got 2 short films. Talk about bravery, though. I'm an actor, I'm not a writer, but by chance I've written 2 plays, one of which I took to Nicholas Heitner. And as I knew him, I would only kind of approach people I sort of knew or met on occasions. And he really liked the play. But what I'm finding is that the situations are blocked, that they use the same playwrights, David Hare, Carol Churchill, and also the schools attached to these situations. So that play, I'm now going to be very brave, Barbara, like you say, be bold. And I have met Tim Bevan, so I'm going to ring him up and say, does he want my play as a film? I'll tell you the result.
Good for you.
Too.
I think Izzy's also mentioned the Ironclad Hub are a brilliant networking organisation as well. That's in the chat, Julie, if you want to get details of that.
It's the Ironclad Hub. It's like its own social media platform, but for theatre makers. And the people who run it are really friendly, and everyone in it are really lovely. So that's what I'd recommend.
Could you put that up again? You did it. You showed it on the screen. Ironclad, did you say?
Yeah, Ironclad.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Elliot, there was also another one, Elliot, as well, wasn't there, which was run by a young lady who set something up and did some sort of live theatre online. I think Tremaine was involved in that. Do you remember?
Yeah, she was in Birmingham. She did a whole festival. I forget her name. If you, Julie, if you just research, and depending where you are in the city or the country, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. Rangers has just been doing it longer than anyone else.
There's also, sorry, Alice, I was just going to say, there's also Jericho Writers, there's Female Film Club, there's quite a few of them, I think, out there that are quite active as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question. Any other questions for Barbara?
I have a question.
Yes, hi Dina, go ahead.
Hello, sorry guys, I'm just recovering from COVID, so I'm a bit horsey, but Barbara, you've been so inspiring, and Swati and I, Jenny, definitely know that from firsthand, but I always love asking inspirational people if there's anything that they keep remembering back in their career that they would, if they ever thought, oh, actually, I would change that or do it differently, and why?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It's loads of things, probably. Loads. I would say writers obviously tend to sit in a huddle on their own most of the time. I think I would be more collaborative on projects and be more open. But I think when you're first writing, you're kind of getting to know yourself. So it's quite it's quite tricky to be confident enough to work with somebody else. But I often think it's easier, and I wish I'd done that from the beginning and worked more in a group. Obviously I did, making films and so on, but on the writing side, certainly things like documentaries and so on, I would definitely, it's much better to work with other people, much, and not struggle on your own. Also, you get feedback, so somebody, if you know them well enough, will say, that's a blind alley, don't go there, and stop you wasting your time. So that's why it's good to work within a team, I think.
Thank you.
Get better soon, Nina.
You sound terrible.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thanks.
Okay, so Jenny, I don't have any questions as such, but just a couple of comments on my appreciation for Barbara. I just feel incredibly lucky to have collaborated with her, and thanks to Nina for having brought that idea of collaboration in the first place. And it was quite serendipitous how we chanced upon Barbara. We were looking for interesting lockdown stories, and the moment we heard Barbara's story about the Dorset Hall, we just left everything else and we just took that story and focused upon that. And Barbara has been very, very supportive throughout the entire process. And Jenny, we roped in you as well, making you play what you do the best, being the interviewer. It has been incredible, and we have finished with the shoot, and we are in the post-production stage right now. So just hoping something really good comes out of it. So thanks, Barbara, for all the inspiration and support.
Well, what I want to say is thank you, because I really feel that, if you like, pushing to save Dorset Hall has reopened the door for me back into making films and documentaries. And it's been really hard work. Taking on £1 billion company with my team has been tricky, and that's an understatement. And I couldn't have done it without my team. But then the Dorset Hall story in your documentary is able to get out there because of working with you. And so I'm really grateful, if you like, to be able to come back where I'm supposed to be, instead of running a commercial business in Cambridge, which is what I've been doing for 7 years. So it's lovely to come back and be where I'm supposed to be and do a bit more political filmmaking. And thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I'm going to add to that Mutual Appreciation Society and say thank you again to Nina and Swati for bringing Barbara into the fold, because I think without you two, we wouldn't have Barbara as our guest tonight, and it has been an absolute delight. Barbara, thank you so much for your time, and we wait with anticipation about what you might produce and make changes for us and generations to come. Can't wait to see what you do as a full-time creative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Very nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.